a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Stephen Lynn. He's from Bondi, Australia. That's a suburb of Sydney, right?
It's a suburb, yeah, the beach.
But you're on vacation in London.
I'm in London, yeah. So I'm doing a quick visit in London, then to Dublin, yeah, and then back to the US. So yeah.
Yeah, I follow you on Twitter at Dr. Stephen Lynn, Dr. Stephen Lin, and I saw that picture of Stonehenge that you post.
Yeah, wow, that's an amazing place. Have you been to?
I have been there. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it had something to do with religion, right?
It's some strange, but the thing is too, there's megaliths all over the UK. It's really strange, like there's a like a pyramid structure like just down the road. It's really strange, but it's quite an interesting day out.
I'm 100% Irish, and I was at this. I was lecturing in Ireland, and I actually went to the first structure in Ireland that's in a museum or whatever. I think it was 1000 BC, that building we went to, that little. It was yeah, no, you're right. That was in Scotland. But anyway, what's interesting is the United Kingdom is Anglo-Saxon, and those people came from Germany. So it was
Yeah.
Germans went to Anglo-Saxon, then they went up to Scotland, then they jumped off to Ireland. But yeah, I love history. I just love it. So Dr. Stephen Lynn is a board-registered dentist, writer, and TEDx speaker, and published in the Sydney Morning Herald, the British Dental Journal, and About.com. Trained at the University of Sydney with a background in biomedical science, Dr. Lynn's focus has been on the oral systemic connection and how nutrition causes both dental and systemic diseases, with a mission to integrate preventative nutrition into oral health care. His AGD registered CE course has trained over 200 dental professionals in Australia, UK, and US. Dr. Lynn will publish his book, The Dental Diet, an exploration of ancestral, the human microbiome, and epigenetics to model why oral health is the true way, model dietary guidelines. His website, drstephenlynn.com, and social media pages like Twitter at Dr. Stephen Lynn have an audience of over 100,000 people worldwide. And I hope you're just listening to this on iTunes and not watching on YouTube or Dentaltown, because he's so damn handsome and he's got such good hair. I just look extra fat, short, and bald today. How are you doing, Steve?
You're being too kind. You're being too kind to me, Howard. You're looking great, by the way. It's good to see you.
Really? Well, you need to see an ophthalmologist. You must have cataracts on both eyes. So there's still older dentists. You've been out of school 8 years. How old are you?
I'm 33.
When I'm hanging out with dentists in their 50s and 60s, a lot of them are skeptical about this oral systemic link stuff. They call correlation. They say, I wake up in the morning, make a pot of coffee, and the sun comes up. It's a correlation, not a cause effect. But you're buying into it. You think it's more than a correlation. You think it's causal between oral systemic and other diseases?
Yeah, I mean, I think for many decades now, we've had a good amount of research out there, linking, some of these conditions, periodontal disease to heart disease, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. There's pretty strong evidence out there, and it's been, quite well, well established in the profession that, that there's links between what we see in the mouth and what's happening in the rest of the body. But I think there's been kind of a long bridge there, so like, we're kind of seeing, a disease, like periodontal disease in the mouth, and then something end stage like heart disease, but there's really not much in between. So I think the problem has been that we've known the links there, but we haven't been able to pull the actual connections together. So it's kind of the steps between have been a little bit in the dark. So we've actually understanding how we get to heart disease, so, for instance, with gums, is a little bit of a stretch. But I think now we're starting to make those connections, and from what I've seen, a lot of the research is that it's all connected to food, and it all begins in the mouth.
What the most interesting research that I've been enamored with is that the United States has 10,000 orthodontists, and basically all these kids are put through this 10,000 orthodontist machine, and they're all getting braces, and about 25% of them are having to have teeth extracted, like bicuspids and all this stuff like that. But I keep reading non-dental stuff from anthropologists saying, once you go back about 350 years, there's virtually no evidence of malocclusions going back all the way 2 million years ago. So something has recently changed, causing all this malocclusions. And you're born and raised in Australia, and some of the most landmark studies ever on malocclusions came out of orthodontists studying Aborigines and etc. What do you agree that there's more malocclusions today than there was in the Fertile Crescent 15,000 years ago?
Oh, there's no argument about that. That it absolutely was. But that real question, I think that's something that why malocclusion occurs is something that we, as a profession, we've forgotten to ask, or we've kind of danced around for a while. I remember for a long time when I was practicing, and parents would ask me, why is my kid going to need braces? Why isn't their jaw developing properly? And I didn't have the answers. And when you look through the orthodontic textbooks, we don't really get to the root cause of malocclusion. But when you take it from an anthropological perspective, they laugh when you ask them about whether malocclusion and even tooth decay and gum disease existed, anywhere before the Industrial Revolution. It is unequivocally pops up during the Industrial Revolution when we change our food supply. And tooth decay pops up, about 10 to 14,000 years when we say the Agricultural Revolution is. For the 2 million years before that, there's nothing. You see, and they look at thousands and thousands of skulls. So this is, they're looking at jaws, huge wide jaws with wisdom teeth that are up. So wisdom teeth is the same phenomena. Why does no one eights, fit in their jaws anymore? And it's the same thing. It's a core problem of our jaws not developing the way that we're as a species designed to.
Well, these pediatric dentists and general dentists and orthodontists, a kid's arch won't be developing, so they'll put in a rapid palatal expander to try to spread the arch. And then you read these anthropologists who aren't dentists are saying that that Homo sapien probably nursed for years, and when they're nursing, that was force on their face, and they were fighting it and struggling. And if they fed it something, it wasn't a cooked steamed vegetable; it was raw, and they were chewing and all these forces. And now when a child has just a little bit of difficulty nursing because there might have been a little stress or force equals stress over area, they switch to a bottle. So now they're just guzzling milk without any pressure. Then they start feeding it applesauce out of a jar, and basically the kid doesn't get any more force or pressure or anything. The next thing you know, his teeth don't fit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's something, we've reasonably, this has been around for a while as well, like the physical function behind breastfeeding and how the jaw it's a musculoskeletal joint, and the feedback, just like when you go to the gym and you build, a muscle that builds a stronger bone, the same thing happens in the jaw during development. And, when a baby breastfeeds, they push the tongue, they use the tongue to push the nipple to the palate, which is soft. Like it's soft, you could press it with your finger, and it expands. And that's the forces that are expanding the maxilla. And then the tongue is designed then and taught to sit in the roof of the mouth. And then so that's what expands the maxilla, but it also places the mandible where it should be as well. So our teeth are just the result of all these forces, all our facial muscles, but mainly very much the tongue and breathing forces occurring during feeding, but also the forces during feeding as well.
And I feel sorry for nursing mothers because the world is so insane. If you make a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has a man-made M16 machine gun and kills 100 people, it's rated PG and it's a family film. But if some girl whips out a mammary gland in front of mammals, they all run for the doors and want the movie closed. I mean, girls feel a lot of negative pressure nursing in public. It's like, damn, we're all mammals. We give birth to live young and we nurse, and it scares everyone, but a machine gun doesn't. That's all good.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way in terms of what we know about and how important breastfeeding really is. Some of the really interesting stuff is, for instance, the mechanisms of how the breast milk transfers, the microbiome to the child's mouth and gut. So there's actually lymphatic cells, bringing gut bacteria from the mother's digestive system to her mammary gland and delivering it via breast milk to the child's oral and then gut microbiome. So there's so much literature out there in terms of the benefits of breastfeeding, and it shows that these traditional societies, they were really onto something. They weren't doing it by accident. There's deep-rooted health and developmental factors, and that are all linked to nutritional development in the mouth, but also throughout life. These principles occur throughout our life.
How long do you think a mother should nurse its young?
At least 6 months. Longer if possible. I think obviously, in the modern day we have life's different now. But 6 months as a general guide for minimum. But some people go up to 2 years. And if that's possible, things like baby-led weaning, which I'm sure talks about kind of a gradual step off. But really, the key as well is to not go into these sippy cups and kind of pacifiers that are causing these oral habits that really aren't shaping the mouth and giving that tongue posture as it should be.
This gut microbiome is very, very interesting. I mean, they say when a human looks in the mirror, everything they're seeing, their body, that they got from their mom and dad is about 1 trillion cells. But from the mouth to the anus is about 10 trillion cells. And you see this gut microbiome affecting the oral health because you notice things like if they got a lot of perio, they don't have decay. If they got a lot of decay, they don't have. So you see the balance of the jungle is affecting. So the gut is affecting the mouth. Do you believe gut microbiome affects periodontal disease and decay?
Absolutely, and it's a bidirectional relationship. Like going back to the breastfeeding thing. We know that when a child's born, as it comes out of the birth canal, its digestive system, it doesn't have the flora there that it will have later in its life. So the way it gets these microbes is via its environment, its breastfeeding, which is the primary source. But the first thing that happens is that those microbes colonize the mouth, and then eventually they start to seed the gut. And in the first months of life, they're actually the same. So the oral and gut microbiome are the same. But then what happens is they become distinct yet related, biological entities. And the gut microbiome, like you say, it has, there is an explosion of scientific literature showing what, the processes that these bacteria are controlling, and it's mind-boggling. We're talking about digestive, the immune system, metabolism, right through to the brain. And when we look at things like the gums, which is a interface between bacteria, your blood cells and the immune system, your immune system, 80% of it starts in the gut. And so what these microbes actually do is they talk via your digestive lining. So they send messages, and they're basically telling your immune system what to be tolerant of and what to be wary of. And so what we're doing is we've completely changed that environment. When we wipe bacteria out and we don't replace them with the bacteria that we're supposed to have, our immune system doesn't get the right messages and it goes haywire. So whenever we see bleeding gums, it's an immune response that's not familiar with these microbes. So we're losing this relationship. And tooth decay, it's really bacteria are there managing the calcium going into the minerals going into our teeth. They use it to build their plaque. And so what they do is they're monitoring what's happening in the oral environment. And so when we send like a sugar tsunami into the oral microbiome, they actually release calcium from their plaque to make sure that to help us out so that we don't demineralize teeth. But then eventually, if we keep doing it, there's no calcium left. We deplete it, and they have to go into the teeth. So we force the oral microbiome to go into this state of imbalance.
Were you born and raised in Sydney?
Wollongong, just about an hour south.
But I mean, you were born in Australia.
Yeah.
And they've been really, really pioneers this. I mean, it was an Australian doctor. Americans were treating ulcers all surgically, and it was an Australian doctor who said that's a bacterial infection. It was the helicobacteria, and started treating them with antibiotics. And the Americans thought he was crazy for a decade. And then it happened again in Australia where some doctor, but that was a woman doctor, and it was another woman doctor in Australia who saw this kid very upset and sad and crying every time he pooped. He had gone through chemo. I think it was some leukemia cancer, and his anus was all raw and all this. and she told her mother to give her a bowel movement, and started doing these fecal transplants, and repopulated his gut microbiome, and then his anus and everything all healed up. And it just makes so much sense that if you've been on chemo for a year, think of
Mm.
all the bacteria that destroyed. And then I'm even seeing more literature where they take rats or mice, which live a 2-year life, whereas sapiens about an 80-year life, and they give one antibiotics and the other one not, and the antibiotics kill so much gut microbiome that it goes into obesity.
Mm. Yep.
And then at the 1 year mark, at 1 year old where they half live, they start doing fecal transplants from the skinny to the fat one, and then he gains back. And here we have the United States, which is 5% of the population and takes half the prescription pills in America and is
Mm.
plagued with obesity. Do you think antibiotics have messed up the gut microbiome?
I mean, our environment in general is, we are very, we try to be as antibacterial as possible. And, like even, the dental office were guilty of it, obviously, as well. And it really goes back to, that first, the Australian scientist, he said, in the 80s, we didn't think that one microbe lived within the body. We thought that stomach acid killed everything. And so that's why it took so long for those Australian scientists to convince anyone that H. pylori was the cause of stomach ulcers. And they were, Australians have got this rogue kind of, unabashed way of proving things. So what they did is they drank the broth of H. pylori, gave themselves stomach ulcers, and then cured themselves with antibacterials, and said, "Look, this is actually
Are you serious?
That's how they proved it. No one believed them until they gave themselves stomach ulcers by drinking a broth of H. pylori. And they did it multiple, and then they had to reproduce it in the study as well. So, this is kind of how we get stuck in this, little bit of a scientific dogma. And then all of a sudden, that was a whole world open. And so that was in the 80s. That was only, we're talking 30 years ago. But then really within that period, the 2008 was where this all opened it up. So that's less than 10 years ago. And this is when they did the Human Microbiome Project. And that's when we actually sequenced how many bacteria actually live within, and other microbes as well, how many they live in the body. And we're talking, 10 times your own cells or thereabouts. But the real number I think is amazing is 100 times your own genetic material. So for every piece of your own genetic material, there's 100 times bacterial genetic material, throughout your body. So that just puts into perspective how potentially influential our environment is. So if we've got this truly, it's a universe inside of us that we know barely anything about, and that it's got this control over our genetic material. We really have to think about how to live in harmony rather than trying to kill these things.
So walk these kids through. They might not have remembered Weston A. Price. Refresh their minds about Weston Price.
Yeah, well, Weston A. Price. Weston A. Price was something that I stumbled across actually outside of my dental job. I'd never heard of him, and I think generally he's not very well acknowledged in our profession as what for the work that he did. It was quite unconventional. So Weston A. Price was a dentist from Cleveland in the 1930s, and he had this theory that the modern diet was causing all this chronic sickness he was seeing in his clinic in Ohio. And so what he did is he planned this worldwide study, and he went to all of the different continents around the world, so nearly 12 civilizations, and looked at when the modern diet intercepts the traditional diet. And so he looked at the dental decay, he looked at the faces, took 19,000 photos of these people before they, when they ate the traditional diet, and then what happened once we give them our modern food. And he showed in every single case in one generation, as soon as we bring in the modern diet, that both tooth decay springs up to the modern rates that we see today, but also malocclusion. So before that, and this is going back, he would look at the skull records as well, so the anthropological history of each place. He would show that malocclusion and that wisdom teeth and the skulls in the area would all grow 32 perfect teeth and not have these orthodontic problems that we do today. And it was all related to food. He put it down to this fat soluble vitamin system. And what he did is he measured the amount of vitamin D, vitamin A, and this mysterious third substance called what he called activator X. And so what he did is he looked at all the food. He showed that these societies were having up to 20 times as much as these fat soluble vitamins as what we do in modern food, because we basically strip it out. But he couldn't identify activator X, and so that was a 60-year mystery. And his book was lost. So nutritional and physical dehydration went missing up until about 2000, when the foundation reprinted it, and it's all online, and they started to rehash his work. But it wasn't until 2007 when activator X was actually identified by Chris Masterjohn as vitamin K2. And now, so subsequently, we can start to piece together what Price was saying, is that there's this fat-soluble vitamin activating system that actually places calcium in the body. So without adequate vitamin D, we don't absorb calcium. Without vitamin A, we don't activate the cells that turn over bone. But K2 is really crucial because it activates the proteins that carries calcium into the bones and teeth. And the crucial thing about that is that there's a study in 2011 that shows that so when you supplement women with who have osteoporosis with vitamin D and calcium, they don't increase bone density, but they actually have more heart attacks. And that was kind of came out of the blue. And they couldn't ethically do the studies anymore. But the reason is because giving vitamin D and calcium floods the system with these minerals. Without the K2, the body can't put these minerals where they need to go. And so what happens is the vessels calcify, and you end up having strokes and heart attacks. And there's one thing that we dentists see in the mouth that is such a great indicator of this of Price's legacy. It's that when you see that really caked on dental plaque, that calculus, that just that patient that comes in and it's caked on. There's some patients, that they will clean and they'll clean and they'll clean and they'll come back and it still builds up. And whereas some patients won't touch anything and they won't get that calcification. But that's a lack of that K2 that's activating the proteins that carrying calcium into the bones and teeth. So that's one sign that we see, that is straight away that we're not eating enough of this vitamin system. And it's really one of the most misunderstood nutritional systems. We really haven't got this back into mainstream medicine where we're starting to recommending these vitamins.
And what's interesting is he started the National Dental Association, which was basically research, which was folded into the American Dental Association in 1914. So that's funny because he started the National Dental Association, which became the ADA's research section, but a lot of people also credit him as the first holistic dentist. And I think that term is so polarizing because when dentists in America, conservative dentists, hear holistic, they think quack, 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 quack. But then when you talk to them, they're extremely holistic. Like if the doctor told them they had high blood pressure, they wouldn't want to go take a pharmacy pill. They'd want to change their diet and exercise. I mean, you look at all their thoughts and actions, they're completely holistic. But you say holistic to a dentist and they cringe. And yet I know from a marketing point of view that dentists on their websites who say they're holistic or try to do things all natural or biological or diet and nutrition, it's very excellent marketing. I mean, people drive an hour to go to an all-natural dentist.
No, I completely, that term, holistic really has, I mean, because it doesn't exactly have a definition, does it? But like you say, we're all oral health practitioners and we all understand that connection, and how important, dental health is. So there's no distinction, I think, between, it's just, I think we need to kind of really define how we're approaching this oral systemic connection and really get to the bottom, how we're preventing and also, talking about nutrition and food habits.
You've also talked about Pottinger's Cats, A Study in Nutrition. Why did you like that book?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, that's another interesting one. And so this was a study done on on cats and not humans. But Francis Pottinger was a physiologist. He was doing studies on adrenal glands, and what he showed so he had a bunch of cats, right? I think he studied, he talked about hundreds of cats. So he was using different amounts of food because he had to feed all these things. And so certain types of food, he found that cats would respond better to the medicines they were testing. And so that subsequently led him to go and test the effect of diet on cats. And so over a 10-year period, he tested 900 cats on different types of diets. So the natural diet, which is for cats because they have a carnivorous digestive system where raw meats and dairy products. But then he would test cats with cooked and processed dairy. So like basically the modern human diet that we feed ourselves. And what he showed was that there was a profound effect on the study group that was eating these foods. So the cats that ate the natural diet, they lived for 9 generations, no change in health. Great coats and no changes at all. But the study group in the first generation, they began to have skeletal deformations. So the first thing that showed up was that they started to have crooked teeth. They had inflamed gums, and that they also started to have like skin infections. Then in the next generation along, things got a lot worse. Is that their bones actually started to thin out. So the density of their bones thinned down to 10% of that first generation. And then so what happens then is that their behavior started to change. They started to lose their agility. And then by the third generation, their manes were completely infested. Some of the cats were born with 10 fractures in their limbs. They had 1% of the calcium in their bones compared to the first generation. And then the most concerning thing there was that by the fourth generation, they were completely died out. They could not reproduce at all. And so what he did was he then took those third generation cats, he fed them that diet again, and it took 4 generations to heal to get back to where they were in that original study group of cats. So that really speaks to the epigenetic and the environmental influence of food. And so to me, the first changes he saw in that population was dental and skeletal problems. And when I see those results where the cats have 1% of their their skeletal bone density, when you look at kids' jaws today, our bodies simply aren't putting calcium where they're supposed to be. I remember I had this patient, and he grew up on a farm, and he had a head like a bowling ball, and he had an 8 that needed to come out. It was fully erupted. It just it was he'd eaten sugar later in life, and he was it needed root canal. He'd prefer to have it out. But I remember walking to the dental surgery and thinking, oh great, this is going to be a nightmare. But when I went to get my instruments on that tooth, the luxator wouldn't even fit back to to his 8. Like his jaw was so long, and I had to cut a flap and remove buccal bone, and the amount of bone I had to remove, I was just thinking the whole time, is that there is so much bone here. I never see this amount of bone in kids today. Our jaws just aren't developing, and we have 8s that are crammed up against the 7s, and even 7s that are impacted now because our bodies aren't building this calcium like they did for millions and millions of years. And so to me, Pottinger's cat really speaks to that, and that when our body isn't building bone, that's when things are fundamentally going wrong.
You were talking about that study of cats. I read one paper that when they started sequencing Streptococcus mutans from humans, that the closest relative to it was actually a Streptococcus mutans from cats, and they thought it might have jumped species 15,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's potentially true, but I mean, the important thing about the oral microbiome is Strep mutans lives in the healthy, in the healthy state. It's there, right? But the real issue is losing that balance. It's like H. pylori. H. pylori lives in health in the digestive system. The problem is when it tips out of balance, we lose those, the markers that keep keep things as they should. So there's many species in the oral microbiome that, for instance, inhibit strep mutants, and so lactobacillus, they release acids, and they stop them from doing overgrowing. It's the problem is when we throw our modern diet in there, we lose that diversity, and then the ecological system loses its adaptation mechanisms, and so then we tip everything out of balance. So I think our one species focus really is a bit limited because we don't think about what's happening. There's 600 species. We only know half of them, and they have intraspecies, interspecies interactions. The strep mutants is the end result of long-term dysbiosis.
And Rella Christian, she told me on this show that they're discovering a new species of bacteria in the mouth every quarter. So it's averaging 4 discoveries a year of a completely new species in the mouth.
We only know half. There's estimated 600. There's probably more, probably 7. We know half. So, and that's bacteria. We don't know anything about, for instance, very little about fungi, about archaea. They think that, for instance, irritable bowel disease is a problem with archaea, which is a very unknown species of microbes that deal with nitrate transfer in soil. But the human body also has this species as well. So when we don't know anything about it, and the microbiome is part of our physiological system, and yet we're just. I think species is obviously we need to keep going with that, but we've got to think about the whole thing.
Well, in the beginning of the show, you were talking about how when mothers are nursing their young, they're transferring their gut biome, their oral bacteria, all that kind of stuff like that. But when you're talking about the balance of the mouth, I mean, you go into dental offices and they're treating grandma every 3 months for periodontal disease for the last 10 years, and they've never seen grandpa. He hasn't had his teeth cleaned in 10 years, but they kiss each other, they share utensils, they're cross-contaminating each other. Do you think periodontal disease and Streptococcus mutans? Do you think when you got a really clean mouth and you're kissing your lover and they have a completely filthy mouth, do you think that's affecting your oral bacteria, gut microbiome?
There's definitely transfer. But nearly all of the literature, that's looking into the microbiome shows that diversity is health. So we show that kids that grow up with pets or kids that grow up with exposure to soil. There's soil-based kind of cosmetic products now that allow us to get exposed to the microbes that spread on the skin microbiome and then interfere. Intermix with the oral and gut microbiome. But they even think that we have this microbial cloud, and there's studies that show this as well. So everyone's got their own individual cloud, like around, and it's a microbial cloud. So and there's the respiratory microbiome. There's the things like the vaginal microbiome, which is transferred to the kid's oral microbiome. So there's this entire system here that is constantly in communication. It's communication with our immune system, but eventually our genes. They're playing with our genes the entire time. So everything we do is a factor. But like in terms of for instance, I think a good example is that we tell mums not to kiss kids, in case we transfer these strep mutans bugs, but that really fails to see that the mum is the main vehicle of bacteria in this. So what we should be saying is that mum's microbiome should be as healthy as possible, and then we should be encouraging her to transfer this as best as possible.
That vagina microbiome is probably one of the most important things they've discovered in the last 10 years, because when the AIDS epidemic broke out, when the World Health Organization went to countries like Africa, all the countries that focused on the pregnant mother who's HIV positive and giving them the drugs to deliver a non-infected baby, they have incredibly low rates of HIV. But the only country in Africa where the president of their country, South Africa, said, "You're not coming in, you're not doing that, it's voodoo, it's harming our image," and all that stuff. And now they're sitting there with a 25% HIV population and that was all an understanding that the vagina microbiome, you can't deliver a kid in an HIV positive mother without it cross contamination. And it's so sad when you go to South Africa. Not only is it 1 in 4 unemployment, it's 1 in 4 HIV positive, and there's not another country on earth that's even 3%.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I mean,
that was one of the biggest human rights mess ups, atrocities. I mean, I'm sure the guy was sincere. I mean, people just believe what they believe. I mean, my oldest sister is a Catholic nun. If you listen to what she believes, I mean, people just believe what they believe. But man, I'll tell you what, this gut microbiome is getting very serious. Why? I've read so many of your blogs and so many of your articles. I've been stalking you for years and years and years. You seem to be really obsessed with the fat soluble vitamins, the A, D, E, and K. Why do those interest you so much?
yeah. So I mean, this is kind of like the core of what Price was talking about, But they're really some of the most misunderstood, nutrient systems in the body. It's vitamin D. You probably remember it had a real uptick in kind of, the understanding and like what we knew it did. We know it forms from the sun, but the amount of literature there now to show what vitamin D does in the body is profound. And it's astounding to me that we don't have vitamin D testing in every dental office for every patient. Before they even sit down, it should be the absolute baseline, because what it tells us about the body is fundamental to calcium, to the immune system, the microbiome, right down to the everything. Vitamin D acts on every cell in the body, right down to 2,000 to 3,000 genes. So that means there's 2,000 to 3,000 genes in the body sitting there with a vitamin D receptor. If you're deficient, which 75% of people are, then your genes are in distress. And so I think we've just completely misunderstood this system. And in the dental chair, we see the first signs of vitamin D deficiency. There's good literature, between the links between tooth decay and periodontal disease. You test any of your patients that show up with a cavity or with periodontal pockets, I guarantee you they've got low vitamin D. And once you start to rebalance this system, the body starts to go, oh, hang on, this is how things should be. Their digestion fixes, their immune system settles down, and everything begins to work as it should. And so I think the dental profession really needs to be the sounding board for this, because this is our vitamin system. This is the teeth and bones. Now, this is what we do. And I really think it is Price's theory was that lack of these vitamins why kids don't develop jaws like they do. And so the reason why we have so much malocclusion now is because of deficiencies in this vitamin system.
So you wrote a book, Mom's Guide to Straighter, Stronger, Whiter Teeth for Your Kids and the Whole Family. Tell us about that book, that journey, because I know I've written books before. That writing a book's like having a baby. I mean, it's a 9-month process, and you don't go a day without feeling it moving and kicking. Tell us about your journey of that book.
Yeah, so that's an ebook on my website. That's free to download for practitioners or their patients. It's a quick introduction into how nutrition affects both oral health and whole body health. I think there's so much nutrition information out there. I really think that oral health is a way to simplify it. It's a way to kind of get through all the bad information out there that we've unfortunately kind of come through, and really kind of reshape, what is it exactly that our body needs. And when you eat for a healthy mouth, you can't eat for a healthy mouth and not have a healthy body. So we have the exact model on how to eat for a healthy body. And so that's a quick 4-step guide for, I find that when patients come into the, into the practice, they're not expecting, a complete dietary overhaul. And we have to kind of grade things. So for people that, are interested, but, perhaps a little bit, I'm not ready for, full dietary change, a quick 4-step process really does help them get into that. And, they feel better. In 1 to 2 weeks, they feel better. I have patients lose weight. but it's really a lead into, so my book, the Dental Diet, which is coming out in January next year here in the US, UK, and Australia, that's the full 40-day program, and it's really kind of going right through this whole oral systemic connection and how we, model the whole body health by fixing oral disease.
Most of the people listening to you right now, about 85%, they're driving, they're commuting, and they're not supposed to take notes while they're listening to this podcast, unless they're drinking. If they're drinking and driving, then they can take notes. But will you? Dentaltown has 51 categories: bleaching, bonding, veneers. Will you post a link to that book under nutrition?
Yeah, I've got a load of blogs that were, the microbiome. Why don't we start a nutrition section on Dentaltown so that we can start talking?
We do. We got a nutrition section, and we mostly talk about which filtered vodkas are better probiotics than the others. But no, it's I think it's under here, let me find it. But I want you to start a thread and do that because she's driving to work. She can't take notes, and she wants to go back and find this. Where do I have that? Where is nutrition under? Oh, it's under the forum health topics. And then under health topics, there's AIDS, chewing tobacco cessation, general health, holistic, medical emergencies, mercury toxicity, nutrition, oncology, the oral systemic health, organizational behavior psychology, prostate, smoking cessation, stress management, substance abuse, total hormone replacement, water fluoridation. Would you rather put it under nutrition? Yeah, you want to put it under nutrition or oral systemic link, or what do you want to put?
Nutrition works, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and why don't you start a thread on that, because they're driving and they can't take notes, and then also I when my guests come on, I retweet their last tweet so they can, if they're on Twitter, they can find that. His Twitter is at Dr. Stephen Lin, Dr. Stephen STEVENLIN. I love it. Interior designer for mouths, TEDx speaker, author of the Dental Diet, January 18th. Nutrition, dental, and ancestral medicine. When you're talking about all this gut microbiome, a lot of times the patients say, do you recommend these probiotics? They see a lot of commercials on television for probiotic yogurts. If you go to any of the major pharmacies in the United States, they actually sell probiotic vitamins, some probiotic drinks. Are you a fan of probiotics?
Yeah, there's some good literature, and in certain situations, especially when we're seeing gut dysfunction, there is certainly, space for probiotics, and quality of probiotics is important. So it's really important to know the brands that we trust, and that you're getting a source that's with live cultures. But really the best probiotics is food. When you talk about a fermented sauerkraut or a kombucha, it's got a slab of bacteria in it that sits in there for 2 weeks. And in Arizona, this thing would ferment in a week. And that would be sour, and it's full of these trillions of microbes. Now, we call probiotics, we've got about probably 10 to 20 species that we isolate and we put into bottles. But really, the key is to having these natural exposure to these ecosystems. So I really try. If we really.
Well, Steve, I gotta cut you off, because 80% of our listeners in the United States, and Americans don't want to do any of that. They just want to take a pill. So, what prescription pill are you recommending to give us the most probiotic bang for our buck? And will insurance pay for it? They want to take a pill, and they want someone else to pay for it.
A probiotic's great. It's a. Organic is a great source of. They've got a great also extra virgin cod liver oil and emu oil, which are great for fat soluble vitamins. I order them in the US. They're excellent. They've also got a great probiotic as well, and magnesium supplement, which is pretty much that they're really the core supplements that I recommend to patients, and they're the real ones that fix this fat soluble vitamin system too.
I want to. This is Dentistry Uncensored. We only like to talk about the stuff that's polarizing. And on Dentaltown, there's some buzzwords that are very polarizing. So I want to ask you about these hot buttons. GMO. Some people say it's totally healthy and it just increases production of agriculture. Some people think it's the devil. What's your stand on GMO? Genetically, what is it? Genetically modified? What's the O stand for, Ryan? Genetically modified organisms.
There it is. Yeah, yeah. I mean, look. So the thing about is that we know the environmental and the influential effect on of food on our gene, the epigenetic effect. So when we alter things and when we interfere with nature, I think generally we go the wrong way. And so every time that we've interfered with the food supply, since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen ill health effects. So, I mean, I think that there's a movement back towards understanding that we need to let nature do its thing. And yeah, of course, GMOs have benefits for increased yield of foods, but we really need to be careful of what the end result is to our own genetic legacy, because this stuff has an effect. We don't know yet. And that's the thing. Like, do we want to be playing lottery with your genes? I personally don't.
Another one is organic foods. Is it marketing or real? I mean, like when you go to the grocery store, they have, all natural. I'm always cynical of the word all natural. I mean, hell, hepatitis and HIV are natural. Black holes and tornadoes and hurricanes. I don't know how anyone ever fell in love with natural. I mean, the entire Milky Way is going to be sucked into a black hole, and that'll be real natural. But what do you think about organic foods? I do notice the obvious. When I go to the grocery store, the organic grown bananas are half the size of the non-organic. I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's something going on.
There's certainly a difference between, and there's a pick and choose. Some of the stuff conventionally grown is fine, but I mean, I think so. For instance, our the produce. So, for instance, whether it's raised on grain or grass-fed, we know there's a difference between grass-fed dairy, for instance, or meat, and meat or dairy from a grain-fed animal. So you don't get the same. So, for instance, fat-soluble vitamins from those two, and that's why there's such an increase in grass-fed beef now, because that we know the nutrient system stays to what it should be, in nature, because the cows are designed to eat grass. So there's a difference. So I don't think we need to go, full, and a lot of it is marketing, unfortunately, but we do need to know where our food comes from, and it's important that we do have some kind of control over this, because for the most part, when we interfere in this stuff, things seem to go wrong. So yeah.
More controversy. There's been some articles in the New York Times, which is a very prestigious newspaper, and I know you're thinking about moving to New York, right?
Yeah. I'm heading back there at the end of May.
And you're visiting or you're moving?
No, I'm looking. I'll base there. So the book comes out in January. Yeah, so it looks like I'm going to be there though until. But we'll be around. I'm going to visit Arizona.
Is it because you're going to be doing book tours or?
Yes, so we're doing some talking stuff and building up to the launch basically. Yeah, so it's
Well, you have a face for TV. I have a face for podcasting on iTunes, and so you'll be the perfect mix of Hollywood and information. And I really think you're incredibly on the forefront and very cerebral. I'm a big fan of your stuff. So I want you to weigh in on 2 New York Times articles in the last year or so. One was that there was a study that showed that Americans who took a multivitamin every single day actually lived about a year less than the people who didn't take a multivitamin. Did you see that study? Are you aware of that newspaper article?
I mean, look, so there was a great book called Deep Nutrition by a doctor called Kate Shanahan, and she really, summed up, how complex food is, and it's just this real, it's this, during the 20th century, we really thought we had it nailed. We had antibiotics, we had medication surgeries. Nature, we don't need it anymore. But when you throw one vitamin into your body, there's probably 10 isomers of that certain vitamin. So the message that we make up in a test tube is potentially completely different to what happens when it comes with bacteria and a full nutrient system, and we don't know this stuff. And I think it's important to kind of really be a little bit humble in terms of what we do and don't know, because otherwise, when we're intervening in this stuff, things as go wrong. So I mean, that's a great example. There's multivitamins don't have a lot of good evidence behind them, and so we really do need to think about the wider picture, and that's why a lot of nutritional studies are limited in that we try and break things down to one nutrient and one cause and effect, and it's not an effective way to measure what food does in the body, because how can you control for trillions of bacteria? How can you control for all these other nutrients? There's got to be a wider perspective on this.
So 2 more hot button questions. The same newspaper also published an article that there was 0 research behind floss, and that it was no research. What were your thoughts on that? Do you think floss is an integral part of preventing decay, or do you think it's a much wider microbiome issue and floss really is not the issue?
Well, I mean, the FDA, they kind of went back. They were going back through and cleaning the closets, and they looked at the research, and they showed that we don't have that the strength of scientific causality there between floss and preventing dental diseases. But we dentists, we know that there's flossing helps, right? But I think we've again got to take it from the perspective that even brushing as well, is that we're removing the oral microbiome and the plaque and the biofilm. But if we've got a dysfunctional environment there in the first place, you can scrape it off all you like. Things are going to still go wrong. And so I really think as oral hygiene is being intervention rather than pure prevention, and prevention really is getting back to those processes that are causing the disease in the first place, because toothbrushes weren't around 100 years ago. That's and dental diseases didn't pop up because we weren't brushing our teeth. And you see the patients as well; they don't brush, and their teeth are fine. And it's there's much more going on in the body than just oral hygiene. But that's our tool to trade. But I think it's important to kind of take that wider perspective.
Marketing is everything. Advertising is everything. These Americans, there's so much noise in advertising. And whenever you talk about nutrition, Americans slip into this mode about what diet. I mean, they immediately say, well, so I know they're driving to work thinking, well, Stephen, are you recommending the South Beach diet, the Weight Watchers diet, the Mediterranean diet, the Zone diet, the Atkins diet, the Paleo diet? You're not giving us the name of your diet. What is the name of your diet?
Well, the diet's called the dental diet, but it's I'm really hoping that it's going to clarify a lot of, because all of these diets that we've talked about, we're trying to intervene with end stage processes in the body. So, for instance, what's most diets aimed at? Weight loss. But weight gain in the body is the end process of, we've talked about the bacterial interactions, digestion, the immune system, like emotional factors. We are, when we're treating an endpoint of the system, there's so many things, variables on the way. But when you get in front of it and eat for oral health, so you balance the oral microbiome, you balance the nutrients that place bone into teeth, place calcium into teeth and bone, and you get those epigenetic messages that are forming and getting your breathing right as well. That's how you eat for health. So I really think this goes back to what Weston A. Price was saying, is that the mouth is key to the body, and that we can shape nutrition and oral health through what we know as being the mouth body connection.
So summarize that all up and just tell me what your favorite frozen TV dinner is.
Okay, well, frozen TV dinner.
I noticed on your book, the dental diet on your website, drstephenlin.com, the picture is that's an avocado, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you like that. Again, you're back to fat. You like the fat vitamins in avocado, that it's probably one of the best fats to eat.
Well, we're talking about full fat foods, so butter, avocado, organ meats are full of these things. Things like a fermented food for the microbiome. You have like a nice cut of, say, like I try to eat liver once a week. And that's really getting it's getting away from that low fat, high carbohydrate, low nutrient dense food. So if we eat these and it's really about cooking with these fats as well. So cooking with lard and coconut oil and the natural fats that we've used for many millennia, and that's what our body's designed to absorb all these nutrients. Without those support nutrients, we don't absorb them. All our blood cholesterol, that's what carries our fat soluble vitamins around. And so when we don't eat the right fats to be packaged up, our body doesn't transport them around properly, and that's when things go wrong.
You know what? When you go around the sun 54 times, you start to see patterns. I mean, you really recognize patterns. And I've seen this rodeo before with nutrition on smoking, where at the end of World War II, half of Americans smoked. Now it's under a fifth. It's down to like 18%. Some of the research saying 15%. So the fast food, when smoking started to go down and everybody started putting warning labels in Australia, the United States, and Canada, the tobacco people all went to Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And now you're seeing the same thing with fast food. All the new stores for Kentucky Fried Chicken and Hardee's and all these restaurants, they're all going to the Middle East and Africa. They're just exploding over there. So obviously, and what was so hilarious is that McDonald's, under this storm of pressure, I mean, there's so many moms who would not take their kids to eat at McDonald's. And so after they evaluated this, because they have same store declining sales in America. That's why they're going to, Kuwait and the Middle East and all that stuff. You know what their answer was? Instead of ending breakfast at 10:30 a.m., now they're doing all day breakfast. That was their answer. It's like, it was like, so these people who think that government is evil and free enterprise is always the best, and if we would just get rid of all the government, let free enterprise go. I mean, you have to be insane. I mean, it's like crazy. But you have an amazing mind. So can I ask an unrelated topic? Because I do. I love your amazing mind. And you write books for the parents and all this stuff. A lot of the parents are coming in and they're anti-amalgam. Do you think that amalgam is a safe, effective restoration in children? Or because the mercury is bond to silver, zinc, copper, and tin? Or do you think it is a health concern and should not be placed in children's teeth? If that's not the most controversial question I can ask you, I don't know what is.
I mean, I think I've seen a lot of these patients that went through the 60s and 70s with they got mouths full of amalgam, and like they seem to be in like they're not keeling over there in the chair. So I mean, look, I think that we're probably we've got to be careful with what we put in terms of how we intervene. I think there probably is if people are showing symptoms of amalgam, intolerance or anything to do with allergy or anything like that, I think it would be advisable to remove. But I don't generally go down the road of saying that it should be automatically removed. I've seen plenty of, and it's a great restorative material, it really is. But they really are going the way of the dodo now, simply because of the obviously the aesthetic view. But I think these kind of things these are all top. I really try and focus on what's going on underneath, like things like fluoride's an intervention and amalgam's an intervention, dental composites an intervention, but like if we get to the root cause of the problem, all of this stuff, it becomes much less of a problem to start with.
Yeah, like orthodontists, they're an intervention.
Look, we're always going to need orthodontists, right? But let's start thinking about why crooked teeth are happening in the.
Yeah, and if I was an orthodontist, I would start giving presentations, because you get all these pregnant mothers that would show up. It'd be an amazing lecture, great word of mouth referral. I mean, I think it would be amazing if an orthodontist in Phoenix started giving lectures on how to prevent your baby from growing up and needing braces all naturally. I mean, that would just explode.
Yeah, and it's moving. Like we're seeing the growth of the myofunctional orthodontic community, and this idea of early intervention, and we're changing and things like the sleep. The sleep area dentistry. This stuff has exploded, 5 to 10 years. So we're changing rapidly. It's the next few years is going to be a really exciting time, I think, for our industry.
Oh, it's kind of funny because from 1900, healthcare was 1% of the GDP, and by 2000, it was 14% of the American GDP. And now this year, last year, it weighed in at 17% and passed $3 trillion. And health is a luxury item. When you have tons of money, you're willing to give it all away to live one more year. And what's funny about the last century is from 1900 to 2000, there were 2 world wars, a Great Depression, and it was still an amazing century. And I think this next century is going to be 10x of the last century. I mean, it is moving so fast.
Absolutely, and it's a great point with the healthcare, because there's been such, I've caught the end of this conversation, with the healthcare system here in America, and the costs are astronomical, and it really is kind of this, we're really catching things right at the end, and when diseases do cost however many thousands of dollars to fix them, I really think as a broader society we need to get back and how do we solve these problems before they become chronic periodontal disease and wisdom teeth extractions. There's ways to get this before it costs us our houses.
Well, when you move to the United States, I'll give you some heads up on the United States. No one ever calls Europe the EU. They specifically refer to Germany or Greece or Portugal or Italy or Denmark. And when people say the United States, it's an insane term. You might as well say North America, because you can't compare Alaska to San Francisco, Manhattan to Miami, Phoenix to Kansas. It's really exactly just like Europe, the United States. In fact, even the Federal Reserve refers to 9 different economic zones. I mean, like when you talk about the economy of a state, well, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana is purely, it's really driven by oil and gas. That's totally different than the San Fran economy, which is basically a shipping lane between China and Hong Kong. I mean, so it's a big country, and the healthcare thing and the gun control thing is just something that you just can't touch. I mean, they just you try to take away their guns or tell them that the government is in charge of healthcare, and at least half the country is going to shoot you. So it just is what it is. I mean, my boys. How many guns does your grandma have? How many does she have? I mean, his grandma's got 20 guns. Does she have an automatic? She has an automatic. Oh, she's got. I mean, if you came on her ranch, how big's her ranch? Square mile? Yeah. So her farm's 2,000 acres. If you drove up her driveway and she didn't know who you were, she'd put 100 bullets through your windshield. I mean, that's America. It's one badass, crazy ass country. I mean, it is the most. It is a crazy country. So, who is your book aimed at? The Dental Diet. Is this a B2C book for the consumer? Is this a B2B, dentist to dentist professional book? Who are you aiming this book at?
It's written B2C, so it's being published by Hay House. But there's 250 scientific references, and so I really hope that it can be kind of a guiding book for dental professionals. I teach. My CE course is 2 days, but we have we've got ways to for dentists to start implementing this into their dental practice as well. And so I really want this to be it's a Bible basically for how we start to use these principles with science and literature. And bring it into our practice and start, spreading the word to our patients about this stuff.
So Bible, Bible is just a Latin word meaning book? Just like doctor, docere is a Latin word meaning teacher. And dentist is a Latin word meaning God.
There it is. There it is.
Okay. I added the last part, but I still think it's true. Well, hey, I want to. I'm a big fan of yours. I want to get behind your book. My deal. It comes out in January.
January, yeah.
And how sure are you that they'll meet their deadline and get it out?
We're good. So we handed it. We handed the manuscript in last week, and it's accepted. So it's yeah, we're on track.
Okay, well, you should. I'm Howard at Dentaltown.com. The editor is Tom. Can you reach him, Tom at Dentaltown.com, or you got to go Tom at Friend Me? Yeah. So the editor since 2000 has been Tom Giacobbe. So email me, Howard at Dentaltown.com, and Tom at Dentaltown.com, and you ought to do a launch where in January you have an article on your book, a book review coming out for Dentaltown, which the magazine goes to 125,000 dentists in the United States, but it goes out email all over the world. And then Orthotown, you might put it in Orthotown, that goes to all 10,000 orthodontists. And then I'd also recommend doing an online CE course and call it the book, The Dental Diet, and do an online CE course. And then I'll try to be your marketing agency. I'll try to help you promote the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it a lot.
But it's competing with my new book, which also comes out in January. It's called The Dentist Vodka. And it's for a special vodka for pediatric dentists who have to drink all day in between patients while the kids are screaming. So I hope your book doesn't drown out my book.
I want to get a copy of your book, to be honest.
Well, hey, if you're ever in Phoenix, man, look us up. And I want to tell you that you're moving to New York City.
Yeah, but I'm gonna, we've got a lot of conferences, down on the West Coast and stuff.
Oh my God, New York City is the coolest. I always cringe about international dentists coming to America because almost every time I'm lecturing overseas, any dentist that comes up to me says, "I've been to the United States," and I always say, "Really? Really? Where did you go?" And they said, "I went to the Greater New York Dental Meeting in New York City." I said, "Oh, well, did you ever leave Manhattan?" And they say, "No." And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, okay, you really didn't see the United, because that is such an amazing city, and it's a one of a kind. I mean, there's nothing like it in North America other than Manhattan. I mean, it's just truly just so cool.
Yeah,
and my favorite statistic in the world is that if all 7.5 billion Earthlings lived at the same density as Manhattan, we'd all fit on New Zealand.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And it is like the energy there, but also and there's some really cool dentists doing some pretty progressive stuff there too. So I've really enjoyed that as well. So I feel that that kind of environment is breeding progression potentially in our field as well.
And some of those medical dental buildings in New York City, I mean, some of them have 100 dentists in one building. I mean, it's just amazing. The density of I don't know how many dentists are in Manhattan, but I would guess it's probably 6,000 to 8,000. And so you're gonna go try to get on the Dr. Oz show?
I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. Dentaltown's the first step, right? That's the main stop, right?
Well, the coolest thing about Dentaltown is every famous person goes to the dentist. And so you can find a connection to anyone. But anyway, at NYU, when I was graduating, lecturing to the dental students, email me and I'll do a search of my contacts. But a couple of the dentists there, dental students, have hung out with them several times. So maybe so when you're in New York, you should go. Who was that? Who was that guy? And who was that good-looking dentist, long hair, hangs out with Dr. Oz? But anyway, I'll find that for you, because then if you could go put the book in his hand, and then he'll go put it in Dr. Oz's hand. That's a big B2C marketing. But hey, Steven, seriously, buddy, thank you for coming on the show and talking to all my homies today, and thank you for all that you've done for dentistry. I just think you're, dentistry has 1,000 points of light, and you're one of them, buddy.
It's a pleasure, yeah, and same to you, mate. You're one big point of light in our, you're really doing great things for our profession. I appreciate it.
When you say I'm big, are you talking about my belly or my girth?
Your audience.
My audience. Okay, I'm pretty sure right. That was a passive aggressive dig at my big fat belly. But hey, buddy, welcome to America. And by the way, I'll be in Sydney in Australia the week of August 28th for 7 days. If you're down there. I'd love to meet up.
My buddies, yeah.
Okay, buddy, have a rockin' hot day in London. And when you go to Stonehenge, don't knock those pillars over, because if you knock one down, I have a feeling they're all going to fall down.
Oh yeah, they hold the earth up. It all falls over. Yeah.